Oh, hey, you caught me just as I was about to go work in the greenhouse. I'm about to plant it today. Honestly, that was just a joke. Well, actually, I am going to do that, but I just keep seeing this ridiculous commercial on YouTube, and I just had to make fun of it real quick. But yeah, we're going to start planting the greenhouse today. It's a little early, but I think it's going to be good. I think we've got the go-ahead from up above, and the weather's going to be good. So we're going to start the slow process today, and I'm going to prep the one side of it and get a couple things into the ground and just kind of get a jump start on it and see how it goes. Got to clean out all these plants. I didn't really want them to go to bolt, but I thought that there was going to be a couple things that I would wait for. And you know, usually I don't plant this early, but this year it looks like the weather is going to be on our side. And I just figured, why not go ahead and get a jump start? I mean, it is a greenhouse, so technically a covered structure will raise your zone by 1 when you grow. So that's what we're going to try and do. And just clearing this out and getting it ready. And then we actually flipped what we're going to plant here. Originally, the bed with the carrots behind me was going to be the husk tomatoes. And then the bed that I'm currently working in was going to be the okra. But as I sat back and looked at it, I was like, hold on, I need to swap that because the sun comes across this way and around to the front. So if I put the okra up here, it's going to shade out the husk tomatoes in the back because the husk tomatoes don't get as big. So we're just going to flop it onto the other side, and that way we can get it. Now the other trick to this is I'm actually rushing the hardening off process. But we're going to get into that a little bit later, and I'll show you how I'm going to kind of mitigate that as much as possible because I know what the sunlight does in here and how it affects it, so I can kind of manage my expectations and the process behind hardening off these seedlings. Okay, so I've got the bed completely cleared out at this point. And one reason why I wanted to come out here early is because I really want to get this line here buried appropriately. So I'm going to take some time and bury it down. And I mean, I watered it. Actually, it watered this morning, believe it or not. And it's pretty wet. I may need to actually up the amount of water that's coming in here. But we're going to just kind of fine tune that as the days go on. We've got a little patch to weed here, but I'm going to dig this trench. And I'm not going to make you suffer through that part. Bury this a couple inches deep, and then I'll be able to plant right on top of it. Or I may even, I believe what I'm going to do, because these are tomato plants, is actually plant in the middle so that'll get water from both sides, because I can't do, you know, it's only a 2 foot across bed, so I can't do anything crazy. But that's going to be the order for right now. So dig the trench. I've already started to amend it with these alfalfa pellets again. So you can see that some of them have indeed broken down and some of them haven't. And that's just going to be because I'm using this right here and we don't get rain in the drip irrigation and we don't get rain in here. I'm going to have to come out and hand water periodically to make sure that this gets nice and wet so it'll start to break down. And then that'll add more nitrogen back into the soil so we can get that green growth to start the tomato production. Alright, we got everything buried, we got us a little furrow made. Now we're going to put some pre-plant fertilizer down just to get things going when they're ready. And yes, I do have Asian jumping worms. I appreciate everybody that's pointed it out in the comments. And there's really nothing I can do about it, so if I see them, I take care of them as much as I can, but it is what it is. It's an invasive species, and we'll just have to wait for a predator to arrive, essentially. So, yeah, they're buried about 2 to 3 inches deep. And then, actually, it's funny, the top seems really dry. But once I got down and dug in the soil, like, it really is wet deep down. So, I think what I want to do, just to kind of help things, because it gets really warm in here. I mean, I put this cloth on top of the roof here, and it definitely has kept it down. Right now in the daytime it's getting about 85 degrees, so it's plenty warm in the daytime, and at night we're staying about 5 degrees above the low temperature. But because it gets so hot, it dries out really fast. So I think what I'm going to do is maybe once a week or something, I'm going to come out here and just water it with a watering can just to get the surface a little wet. and then that'll help kind of penetrate a little bit more water into it, and then make it, you know, break down the stuff on the surface, because I'm gonna put a lot of mulch in here too to hold some moisture in. Last night it was about 45 degrees outside. No, I'm sorry, it was 37 degrees. But for the next 10 days, it's not supposed to get below 50 at night. Now that means if it's gonna be 50, it'll probably be like 47 here or something. But again, 5 degrees more in the greenhouse is all the difference in the world. So I figure we'll give these guys a chance. Now I've had a lot of problems with my husk tomatoes this year. These are ground cherries or husk tomatoes. I call them husk. They taste like a pineapple, and you don't pick them until they fall on the ground. But I had really old seeds, so I had really bad germination, and then they grow differently than tomatoes. They don't really grow as big, and as fast. So we're gonna go ahead and get these in the ground now, and I've only been hardening them off for 2 days, so they're not even really hardened off, but we're gonna mitigate that. So once we get these in the ground, we're gonna do a little bit of covering and stuff like that, because I know how the sunlight comes into this greenhouse in the times of day, so I can kind of help this process along and really harden it off in ground. So when we harden them off in ground, I mean, it's not really ideal, but to be honest, I think for these tomatoes, it's the best method possible. Like I said, we had a lot of problems with them. So we're gonna get them out, and then we're gonna put them in the ground, and then I'm just gonna take a pot and cover it. I'm not gonna disturb the roots at all. So what this is called here is called slip potting. And this is actually really hard because the plant's smaller, but we're just gonna take it and just slip pot it. I'm not really gonna work the roots. I'm not really gonna bury it very deep or anything like that. We don't wanna cause it any undue stress. So just like that. That's, I mean, really all we're gonna do. A lot of times I'll kind of tease the roots a little bit maybe, or you know, do something to kind of activate the roots and spread them out, but there's not a whole lot of roots here, so we're just gonna slip pot it. So now that we've got it all planted, we know how the sun's gonna fall, and we're still kind of hardening them off. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come out here, and then let's just, for example, I've got, you know, 100 of these laying around. So what I'll do, I'll come out here in the afternoon and just simply cover it up. And then, you know, in the heat of the day, when this is getting the most sun, I'll cover it up for a couple days, and then each day just kind of less and less. And so then it'll be able to harden up, because what we're doing is we're protecting it from the harsh sun. I've never grown in this greenhouse in the summertime, so I'm excited to see how it goes. Now I can expect it going 2 different ways, clearly, good or bad, but there's a little bit of caveat in there. One scenario is it grows great. You have no issues at all, especially with in-ground watering. We could have no issues, great harvest, all that stuff. I don't anticipate that being the situation. I expect to have a couple issues. One is going to be, I expect it to be really hot in there, and things may not thrive as much as I'd like to throughout the season. But that being said, it's very early April, and if you remember in the last video when I said what I plant in April, usually my tomatoes go in the ground about 2 weeks into April, roughly. This year will definitely be earlier, but we're getting them in the ground now, so we could potentially get a pretty good harvest before the real heat kicks in and just starts to cook that greenhouse. Now last year I didn't have any kind of irrigation in there, so in the summer I just let it dry up, and it was kind of a pain. So this year we have a setup to keep the water going into the greenhouse, keeping the soil fairly moist. We're gonna mulch it real heavy. We've got it covered, and I'm gonna try and take the panels out, at least one panel, to get a little bit more airflow in. We've got a better fence, so we should be able to keep it a little bit cooler. But last year we were averaging about 125 degrees in the greenhouse in the summertime, which is pretty dang hot. Now with this on here, I'm imagining we're gonna be touching the 100 mark. We'll be right at the century mark, maybe a little bit more. And tomatoes don't like that. But that's why we're putting the okra in there too, so hopefully they will flourish in that environment as well. So we're trying to basically mitigate what damages can come from the heat by what we're planting. So we're trying to pick things that really like the heat as much as possible. And the husk tomatoes, I'm not really sure. I have a feeling they don't really like the heat that much, but You know what I mean? So I think when last time we planted them, we put them in the onion bed, and we ended up getting most of our harvest from roughly May to July. So we're hoping that's the case in this garden. So if you look in here, obviously the tomatoes are here. We are waiting for our carrots over here to get done. And even if they're not done, we're gonna give it about a week, and then we're just gonna pull them all out. And then we're gonna put our okra in. But see, our okra typically doesn't go in the ground until about May. So we're looking at an easy month ahead of time to get the okra in the ground in there, and it likes the heat. It is just, you know, it loves it. So it shouldn't be an issue. So we're gonna let that get a little bit established. We'll come back and mulch it, and then we're gonna plant our okra in there. And then at the same time, we're gonna be coming around now and filling out these pots. So we've got a bunch of pots around here, and we've got some pots over here. Now my question to you guys is, what is a heat-loving plant, like vegetable, that you guys grow that just seems to really thrive in the heat? You know, when everything else is struggling, this one vegetable really just takes off. Because in my garden, we definitely try to plant things like, this is the sunnier side. So we try to plant the warmer, heat-loving plants over here. And then stuff that doesn't need as much, doesn't like heat as much, we'll put in the shadier side. And then even in the back here, we'll do the same. And it looks like over here in the wild garden, we're gonna kind of be dealing with the same issue. It's gonna be a lot of heat loving stuff, because this is gonna get the bulk of the sun all the way until 3 o'clock roughly in the afternoon. So it's gonna be fairly warm. So we really wanna pack that in just right. But you know, if we don't plan it out right, and we put things that really like the heat, like for instance, for us, it's cowpeas, or as I call them, black-eyed peas. We grow them over here because it gets the most heat. Now they do fine over here, and we've done it here, but when we put them over here, we get bigger and better harvests. And the green beans, for instance, they like a little bit cooler. So in that heat of summer, you know, things will start dropping flowers and whatnot, but those green beans will actually hold the flowers longer based on that. So we can get them in the ground, and we can be getting more of a harvest when they're not dropping their flowers, based on using what shade we have available to keep it cooler. So that's what we really are looking for. But I mean, if there's something, like I said, if there's something you guys do that just really loves the heat, like let me know, because I'm always searching for it. And that's why we're doing Seminole pumpkins this year, because the heat, you know, they really like the heat. They grow in Florida naturally, I believe, Seminole pumpkins. So with that being said, like we should be fairly good here. You know, it's just like for us with broccoli, for instance, like in the spring, it's always a crapshoot because it doesn't like the heat, and we have such hot springs. So it kind of goes in between. And I know if you guys live below, I'm in zone 8A, North Carolina. And if you guys live south, then you're like, you don't know nothing about heat. And you're right, but it's still humid and it's hot here, and it just happens really fast. So, you know, using the greenhouse to our advantage and planting early, and I could have planted earlier, but now we're figuring it out. We're gonna use the heat to our advantage, and then the same thing for the rest of our garden. Goodbye.